adult learners, when they're tackling a language, don't necessarily assume that means that you can pick it up in half the time it would take a student. Maybe instead set the goal for much longer and just allow yourself to stew in it for a longer period of time.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
What, wear a badger
At
hat?
that point, you just keep a cigarette hanging out of your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
could
then
do
it's
that.
A
just
little ascot, maybe.
little ascot.
Just to-
Ooh.
Little ascot.
Yeah.
The day I see
like a
Martin in an
French
ascot.
spot.
No, ain't
Oh,
I
gonna-
think you could pull it
gosh.
off, Martin. Just a little neck scarf.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and today we are diving into a topic that I think many of our listeners are curious about, and it's learning Latin and other languages as an adult. You might be wondering, can I do it? Where do I start? Is it possible? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I have some experts here with me. We've got Paul. You not only work on our curriculum, you know Latin, and you know lots of other languages. I am always surprised at your fluency, how much you remember of the languages you've learned.
Yeah, it's getting rusty. I don't use them as much as I used to. French and Spanish and Italian and
Yeah.
ancient Greek. I think Mitchell never believed that I knew ancient Greek until I brought in my translation of the
Oh,
Gospel of
John,
John
I
and showed
remember
it
that.
to him. He's like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
you actually could do this.
That's right.
Yes, at one point I could.
Yes. And we've got Martin, our resident philosopher and Latin teacher. And Ian, you're a novice Latin learner, but more than that, you are one of the editors on our Greek curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
You know New Testament Greek
Mhm.
very well. And I'm glad to have all of you because I think you bring different things to the table that are all going to be helpful. And Ian, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
You've been a regular
glad to be
guest.
here. Yeah,
Glad you're back. I know it's a busy time of year at the press.
it is. Yeah, very busy. Lots of people are getting in orders now.
That's right.
And so we're always doing something.
That's right. And on the language side of things, are you helping to work on the Greek? Are you working on third form?
That's a long-term project, third form Greek. So we have somebody writing that, and it's going to be, several years,
Got
I'm
it.
sure, before
Okay.
it's ready. But that is the goal. That
Fantastic.
is the goal.
Okay, great. Well, before we get started, we always talk about what we're reading. Ian? Oh, Paul.
I just to kind of, I'd like to jump in here real quick.
Please do.
Because before we get into what we're reading, we recently had a conversation about where we read.
Yes.
And we had a conversation where Martin admitted to the world that he sits on his front porch in 90-degree weather and opens the window in order to keep himself cool.
His electric
his-
bills
Wow,
have to be
that's
sky
ridiculous.
high. It's
Yeah.
been so hot.
It's for a good cause.
Now, Martin, I received a text message from a listener yesterday, and they wanted me to share with you this thing that exists. It's a fan with a water reservoir.
Oh.
And so you can put the water in the fan and then it mists you as you sit outside. And he thought it might help your utility bills.
My wife's going to like that.
Yes. So
Better than the other.
The alternative.
That's funny. Oh, we can start a little GoFundMe for Martin's fan. Okay, who wants to start? What are you reading, Paul?
well, I have not had any time to be reading. And so I was listening to Captain's Courageous. And then I got a little, I got sidetracked and decided, in the car, I was just going to blare as loud as I could Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And it's been wonderful. If your car has good stereo, it's wonderful.
This is the thing, and my wife doesn't know it yet, and she doesn't watch the show, so I can say this. But I used to have a really good sound system in my 1970 Camaro Rally Sport, in high school, and I had
The glory days.
these honking
Yeah.
speakers in the back, and it sounded good.
And you listened to Beethoven as a high schooler?
No.
No,
Hopefully not. Yeah.
and I want it for my car now, but if
You do?
I might do it in secret. Just,
What would you be listening to?
I like Celtic music now. I like a lot
nice.
of folk music. It's really
You
what I
like
listen to.
your Scandinavian folk music.
Oh, my Scandinavian.
Yes, you do like that,
Scandinavian
yes.
folk?
Yes, he
That's a
does.
genre.
Yeah, it's sort of half Finnish traditional folk music and half Europop.
Interesting. There you go.
It's
What a
crazy. It's pretty
hybrid.
crazy.
It's wild. Yeah, I remember Martin sent it to me like 10 years ago, and every once in a while, it still pops up on my YouTube, and I'm like, oh, Martin's Finnish folk.
Finish.
Finnish folk and Europop.
Yeah.
That's fun.
But every once in a while, see, talking about wives and blaring music, every once in a while, I have to do this when Sarah's not home. But I will take the speakers we have and I will jack those up as loud as I can.
Mm-hmm.
In something classical, like I'll just sit there, watching the sunset, blaring it as loud as I can, because it's very different to listen to classical, like in a quiet form versus the loud form that you would get in a concert. And so that's one of the things I enjoy doing.
Is it kind of cathartic to listen to it that loud?
Yeah. It's the only thing you can engage with.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I got my best friend in high school. He years ago he had given me this power amp thing. It was just been sitting in a box, and then he sends me. He's cleaning out his house right there, and he sends me these two big, huge speakers because I had just been thinking, people don't know what a good sound system is anymore because they listen to their earbuds or stuff, and these speakers that can move you back a few feet, and so I get these, and my wife said, "What are you going to do with those?" Well, I think of maybe setting up. You're not serious, and I'm serious. So.
See how it goes. I'll check in with you later. Enjoy some.
If you want classical blared, you come to my house. If you want Finnish folk blared,
That's right.
That's right.
Martin is your man. Yeah.
Choose your path.
Mhm.
That's funny. Ian, what are you reading?
So I had been reading, I think it's called Master and Margarita.
Oh.
And it's
that's wild.
fascinating and wild. I kind of put it.
Better you than me. I tried that one.
I put it aside because I've gotten some other things going, but I'm wanting to get back to it. I kind of started it on vacation and was just hooked. And then I've had to come back and read some other things. Additionally, I am reading a trilogy called the Gormenghast Trilogy by a guy named Mervyn Peake, which is this early 20th century fantasy, but it's kind of near fantasy. It's definitely, there are our world elements in this novel. It's gothic. The characters are all kind of grotesqueries. They're all very interesting. It was kind of new for its time. And the unfortunate thing is that the author eventually developed Parkinson's and never finished. So it's incomplete. And then he was also, he had to go, he was kind of shunned after he got Parkinson's. So it's a very dark, gothic, grotesque kind of fantasy. But it's interesting. I go back and forth whether I really like it or not. I'm in the second book, and so I'm going to finish at least the trilogy.
I felt the same way about Master and Margarita, but whether I liked it or not. I did finish it, but I don't know that that's my recommendation on that would be on the lower end of the scale.
Yeah.
I think it only became popular because the Russians tried to censor it.
That's right.
And that's why it became popular. But I don't think
yeah.
it's necessarily like
it is
a great thing in itself.
It's certainly it's a part of its time for sure.
Yeah.
And then a modern fiction I've been reading is The Covenant of Water, which a lot of people have been reading lately.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's set in India, but it is an epic. It's going over the course of more than just this one person's life, and it's emotional highs and lows.
I think Tanya read that.
Yeah. It's definitely for adults. It's a more adult novel, but it's difficult. He has very clear writing. Still, I'm kind of at the point where since I haven't finished it yet, I don't know yet what I'm going to think of it, but I'll finish it.
You get a lot read because you like every day for your lunch break you go.
I do read.
Right?
Yeah.
Martin?
Well, I felt a little guilty at one point about I was not reading enough of the great stuff, right? And so I went back and I for one thing, I'm weak on mythology, and so I started back reading Edith Hamilton's mythology book. But then I went back to Plutarch also and decided I just need to power through this book, and I've been very much enjoying it. And then I've also been reading Dominion. I think I mentioned this maybe before. Dominion by Tom Holland. It's the history of Christianity, and I forget the name of the podcast, but he and another British historian have this podcast, and they literally speak to huge halls of people who it's just them discussing, sort of like what we do, and about history. And they're really great historians. And Tom Holland in particular is a really good writer. So Dominion is just, I've just listened to the first couple chapters, and we're still, the whole history of crucifixion, what it was for, why the Romans did it. It's fascinating. It's really, really good. And then I picked up again, I started to read it a few months ago, and I set it down, The Greeks and the Irrational by E.R. Dodd.
I think I remember you talking about this.
Yeah, and they, because he's talking about how the Greeks, like you read Homer and some of the other Greek works, he talks particularly about Homer and how the characters are deciding to do something and the gods are deciding that the character decides. And they have they're not tortured about this whole free will predestination thing at all. It's both and they don't even think that's a problem. And he goes through this in a bunch of different Greek literature. It's a very interesting thing to see how the Greeks saw that so that it wasn't an issue. Yeah.
Oh, we've all got a lot going on in the reading department. Well, let's talk about learning Latin as an adult. And this question actually came to us from a listener in our podcast inbox, which is podcast@memoriapress.com. So if you have a question, let us know. And here's what Suzanne wrote us. She said, "Good afternoon. I was watching one of your podcasts about learning Latin, more specifically for children. But as a retired adult, I'm interested in taking a stab at learning Latin. My question is, what would be the best way for me to get started, and what curriculum would you recommend? Should I start with the elementary school lessons and work through those, or is there a better source for me as an adult? Thanks for your thoughts and input." So, excellent question, Suzanne. So good. We are going to dedicate our episode to it. And I think we're going to tackle all of Suzanne's questions, but I wonder if it's easier to start with the why. Why should adults who might be juggling family and career and busy lives take time to learn Latin or even New Testament Greek? One of the languages that might not be, you're not going to go on vacation and use it.
No.
And this is for everybody. The why.
I really want to throw this back at Jessica because Jessica's probably the one Jessica and Martin, you are the two that as adults took up Latin completely fresh, I think. Ian, you...
Yeah, I was still in college when I started Greek, so I was still developing.
You're fully developed?
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
But both of you, y'all both did it for work.
That's right.
Right? Like that was your goal. But I think there's a bigger goal, right? Like it's worthwhile for any adult, whether you're involved in classical education or not, because if it becomes something that you like to do, then you can go start reading.
That's right.
Those things in the original languages.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I have a whole plan. I would suggest we'll talk about it later, but just being able to read the scriptures, and it's in Latin. It's not the original language it was written in,
right?
Admittedly, but still seeing that, seeing the Gospels in particular in an ancient language, which Latin is. It is expressed differently, and because sometimes you just you read the Bible in English and you just blow through it, but it causes you to stop and really look at every word so that you get the full meaning out of what you're reading in doing it in another language. Even if you don't do it well in another language and you're working through it, actually that's even better. It causes you to think about it even more. And just some grammatical construction will bring something to light that you hadn't seen in that passage at all, because you're seeing, you're reading it in a grammatical language as opposed to English, which is very different from a Latin and Greek. So, so I think it's good for that purpose, and in reading anything else too. I mean, I do it. I read the Latin Vulgate gospel readings every day in Latin. So.
Well, and that's actually a great way to get into Latin too. Once you have a basis of some of the
I think you need to work on it for a while before
you do. But like the easiest reading is probably the Gospels.
Yes, and like the Gospel of John in particular, very simple.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I translated the Gospel of John.
That's right. That's why you started there.
Not Paul.
That's right.
Others.
That's right.
Well, I want to piggyback off of that because that was my goal in learning Greek and Hebrew. I started that in college before I even considered ministry. So I was 19 or 20 when I first started learning those languages. And so, yeah, at that point, I'm beyond my grammar school stage for sure. And I'm well beyond my high school years. So I am approaching it as an adult who learned it. And I quickly found that unexpected benefits to me that we now espouse all the time is that it taught me grammar for the first time. I had learned grammar growing up, but I had basically forgotten it because my usage of those categories had fallen off. I wasn't parsing things. I wasn't diagramming sentences anymore. But I started doing Hebrew first, and then I went back to Greek, and then I went to seminary. And I, at that point, had decided to devote myself to the languages for reasons that you have already talked about. And I started back with Hebrew again and kind of redid it all and really got a more thorough grammatical education at that stage. I mean, I was doing what we're doing with Latin. I was parsing all the time. I was analyzing the morphology of particularly verbs and participles and others that are a little bit more difficult in Greek and Hebrew, and really hammering that home before I started doing translation. So even as an adult in my seminary experience, it was a grammar first approach that moved into translation and so on. And then after several years had elapsed, I went back into Greek and basically did the same thing, started back over. And what I also found, one of the other benefits of learning a Latin, why do you do this? Why do you learn Latin, Greek, or Hebrew, or some other ancient language, is that it opens up the whole ancient world to you in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. And not only that, but it teaches you how little you know. It's a good kind of that Socratic wisdom of I don't know how much I don't know, It teaches you to be humble because you're realizing early on, especially in a Greek class or a Hebrew class in seminary, you start to get these forms down. You start to think a little good about yourself. You're like, oh, I can parse this. I know what an aorist tense is, I know, I get into more advanced language discussions about verbal aspect versus tense and so on. And while I can have those discussions, I mean, I started realizing early on when I started taking more advanced exegesis classes in seminary, moving on to something like an advanced Greek grammar class, that there was whole worlds of scholarship that I had never considered, had never thought about, had never woken up to. And here I am thinking, oh, because I can parse a verb, I can read a text. No, there is so much more to learn. And so it can give you a hunger that you may not have realized you had. And better perspective about how deep this ancient stuff can go and what it has to offer you.
Well said. Yeah, I think that was helpful. I would echo all of that.
I mean, I think also as if you're in classical education, right, and we are big fans of saying Latin is core and essential to a classical education, then if you're involved in it at all, it makes sense that you would pick it up and at least get, whether you get to that level of ability to read or not, you at least have a familiarity of how the language works, because then that will help you understand why this is so important.
Yeah. Well, and sorry, but to kind of go off of that, I think it's good to kind of think in tiers, as you were intimating. If all you do is just learn grammar in Latin or Greek, those are such rigid grammatical systems. Now, the more you know, the more you realize there's all kinds of what you might call exceptions, but really there are rules behind the rules that go back thousands of years. But what I mean by that is the grammatical categories are easier for you to understand in Latin because of the spelling of the word. Same thing in Greek. And so if all you're learning is grammar, well, your English grammar is going to get better, and you will be a better reader of an English text. Your ability to read a George Eliot novel will dramatically increase.
You see English differently.
You see English differently. Then if you can go on further, if that's phase one, and phase two will be learning how to read. If you can then go on to read, then your understanding of what the ancient authors had to say and how that is progressed through history changes. And your ability to understand the modern moment is therefore better.
You know, so much of the classical tradition focuses on learning Latin early. Elementary school, we start them so little, or even up to middle school. But I'd be curious to know, I bet we can understand experientially how it's different as an adult, but do you think there are any advantages to learning Latin as an adult? Maybe you have a broader context for language. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's obviously easier. I mean, somebody hopefully has taught you
Grammar,
the grammatical categories
adjectives,
in some way.
participles.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just starting in on Latin does require you. You know, what is a direct object? What's the subject? But you know, those you gotta,
Basic.
just basic things that you
categories.
have to have picked up somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think as an adult too, there's this, you know, you develop this idea that, you know, you only know English and you don't know anything else. And and then you start studying something like Latin. And when you translate your first Latin sentence, it feels so good. I mean, there's something right about that, you know, hey, I can translate something from another language. This is so cool. And I think that continues in different ways all throughout the language study. And then you start realizing what you're learning about just language in the abstract, about all languages, the whole system of grammar that you've just been assuming you've never paid any attention to. And all of a sudden you're seeing it in a way you never could have seen it by just sticking with your own language. I think all that's just rewarding. You know,
Definitely.
It's intellectually rewarding.
And I think if you're an adult that only knows English, all of that applies. If you're an adult that knows another modern language, unless it's like Hungarian or German, then learning Latin or Greek is going to be a wholly different experience because of the way of the inflection of the nouns and the adjectives and all that stuff, participles. You don't get that in most modern languages.
And just so our listeners know, when you say that language is inflected, I'm sure most of our listeners have no idea what that means. What do we mean by that?
What we mean is the endings, well, in the Greek, the beginnings too. But the form of the word changes. So you'll have your main root of the word, but the ending or the beginning might change. I'm confusing all the Latin people right now because it doesn't happen in Latin, but it does happen in Greek where the beginning changes depending on its function in the sentence. So your subject will have one particular kind of ending, your direct object will have another one, even though it's the same word.
Whereas in English, we use word order mostly.
Pretty
to
much
make
entirely.
that. You get the subject and you get the verb and then you have the direct object. In Latin, the word order, there's some word order in there, but it's dictated by the end. You know, the subject, not by where it is in the sentence, by what the ending is on the noun, right? Same thing for the direct object. It's got a different ending for the direct object. And so you see it in the word itself. You don't have to depend on the word order.
In the same way we have I and me.
That's right. The pronouns.
Yes. Our pronouns are still inflected.
That's right.
Our verbs are still inflected.
That's right.
I am, you are, he, she, it is.
Yeah.
That's the way I try to explain that to people. They don't know what inflection is. Well, you already have it in some in verbs, and then.
But Latin, it's rare. It's. I remember being excited as a student of Latin when I hit an indeclinable word because it's much more rare to find an indeclinable word in Latin.
It's an adverb.
Right? You get adverbs or you get prepositions or, you know, like satis, and you're just like, oh, it just means enough. And it's just, it's indeclinable. You never decline that word. and those are
Well,
nice.
and something that Greek has that Latin doesn't have is the article. And so the Greek,
Yes.
we used to talk about, you kiss the article because you run into an article. And now once you know the articles, because they're forms of the articles, once you get those down, you know what the word is.
Just for those people who don't know what an article is.
An
like
article, the.
Right. But you're saying once you identify the form of the article,
Yeah.
you know that
You know
the
something
case
about-
of the
Case number,
word
gender.
coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like comparing Latin and Greek, because I studied Latin in grad school, and
I'm sorry, you mean you studied Greek in grad school?
I'm sorry, studied Greek in grad school. Thank you. And then later learning Latin, Greek has the articles. It has all these little things that are going on, and then in Latin, all of a sudden come Latin. And
It's like, get rid of that.
it's like coming up against a rock, and there are no articles.
Yeah.
This is so typical of Romans. So why use the? What is the? What is a the?
Yeah.
Why
do you need it?
Why do you need it?
Yeah.
Out.
Stone there.
Right.
Well, and that gets to one of the benefits of learning these kinds of languages is that it teaches you there are different ways that people attack the same issue over time. The Latins did it one way, the Greeks did it, the Romans did it one way, the Greeks did it another, and it helps you expand your understanding of the possibilities of things, of expression.
And I would tack on to that. Once you then add modern languages to your repertoire, you can carry that forward and say, okay, it's not just that we're doing something different over time,
Yeah.
but in our modern day, we're looking at things differently.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is also why, like when I'm reading somebody like, E.R. Dodd or really any of the old classic great writers, you're reading people who have been trained in Latin and Greek,
That's right.
most likely. And you see the way they write and you think, I want to write like that. And you think maybe the way I can write like that is to copy that style. And no, go back and do what they did.
Sure.
Learn the languages they learned. That's the only way really you're going to be able to write like that.
Well, and one thought I had about learning as an adult that is maybe a benefit is as children, you're rigidly in a grade level system. You have your 1 year to learn this, your next year to learn that. As an adult, you've got time. For as long as you're alive, you can keep just learning. And so I would encourage adult learners when they're tackling a language, don't necessarily, we said it's easier as an adult, but don't necessarily assume that means that you can pick it up in half the time it would take a student. Maybe instead set the goal for much longer and just allow yourself to stew in it for a longer period of time. I found that I did Hebrew, I did Greek, and then for my last stage of study in seminary, I learned Syriac, which is related to Hebrew. They're very similar, also related to Arabic, the other Semitic languages. So I had a background to get me to Syriac, but I have barely touched it in the last 2 years. But I know, I've picked up languages and I've set them down. I can just pick it up again.
Yep.
As an adult, I have that ability to one day say, I'm going to get back into that and do it at my own pace.
Nice.
Well, and the advantage of doing it as an adult too is that you're self-motivated to do it.
Yeah,
right? You
that's
want
right.
to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
As opposed to most classrooms
do it.
where at least have some students that we're having to convince you have to do
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
Well, let's get practical. As an adult learner, where would you have them start? Would you say join a study group, get a book, get flashcards, go to a class? Martin, you said you had a plan.
I have a plan. Okay. So here's what I would do if I was a person I didn't know Latin, I wanted to learn it. I would start with our form series, okay, which our form series takes you through Henley 1, the first Henley 1 text, and that's a substantial book.
Can
Right.
I just clarify?
Yes.
When we say takes you through Henley 1, we're saying it teaches the equivalent concepts.
Yeah,
A different order. Yeah.
But you
in a
don't.
different order.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
need. It's not like it's just a guide to the Henley 1 book.
Exactly.
Right.
But Henley 1 is what Cheryl learned from. Cheryl Lowe learned
And
from.
what I learned
and
from.
Martin learned from. And Cheryl went through multiple different Latin texts trying to find one she could learn from.
Yeah.
And she finally found Henley, and she thought, "Oh wow, this is actually organized in a way I can understand."
And
but then she then did the form series to make it.
you
More,
could start
even
with
more
Henley, but
comprehensive.
what Cheryl does is, and I don't know why Henley doesn't do this, because Henley starts with nouns. Nouns are hard.
Mm-hmm.
She starts with verbs. Verbs are much easier, you know, and so she takes Henley, but changes the order of things in a much, I think, a better pedagogical way, right? And so, and I'll stop there and say, and if that still really intimidates you, if you just sort of then just go get Latina Christiana and work your way through it.
And what is that?
Well, Latina Christiana is just, I don't know. Paul,
it's a primer. I mean, you get some vocabulary. You get
some very basic
ideas of singular and plural.
It's really
the
teaching
idea of case.
the parts of speech.
It really is. Right. Yeah, it's getting the parts of speech really solid,
so that you're able to do a real simple sentence by the end of that book.
But the reason Martin's suggesting start with first form is because our big assumption as an adult is that you are able to leverage basic grammar, not complex grammar, but basic grammar. And so you don't need to spend that extra money on the Latina Christiana books, but also the time going through that, because all of the vocabulary and the forms that are taught in Latina Christiana are taught again in first form.
Well, and I think even if you feel like you just don't have basic grammatical categories, they're going to come back. They're going to come back pretty quickly, because even if you don't think what is the subject of the sentence, what is the main verb, after a few little exercises, you're like, oh, I know that. I know what the object is.
So I would do the form series, which again is Henley 1 refashioned, right? And then I would continue on with Henley 2, which you can tell that most of the kids back in the day when that book was being used in the 50s never finished Henley 1, because he basically, the first half of Henley 2 is just the last half of Henley 1, right? And then he goes on and does Caesar after that. But after I think after you go through the form series, that you are able now to start looking at the Latin Vulgate. And here's what I do, okay? I have on my computer, it's called VulSearch 4, and it is a translation program. So what you see on VulSearch is the Latin on the left side and the English on the right side, and then it is packaged with it's another Whitaker's Words, so that you can take your cursor and hover. If you're reading the Latin through and you get a word and you don't know what it is, you just put your cursor right over it. It will tell you not only what word that is, what it means in English, it will give you its grammatical form, which, once you've done Henley 1, you know how to work that. And so you can look, and so what I do is I'm looking and I can't get that. I hover it over. Okay, right. And then, but if I can't get any further, I go over and I can look at the English, and then I go back and see why it's in English that way. So you're learning more stuff, and the more you learn, just the quicker you go. But you have all your tools there to get through it, right? So and I do that with the gospel reading from the church gospel reading every day is what I do, and those are easier than most of the other stuff. Than Paul's letters, as you. Yeah, not you, Paul.
The Paul I was named after.
The apostle.
Oh, okay, there you go. And that's what I do. And if you do it every day, the better you get. It's noticeable. The more consistent you are, the better you are at it.
Well, it's like children reading. I mean, I don't know why, but recently it occurred to me that you have children go and they read something that's maybe a little higher than their level, but they can sound out the words. They don't necessarily know what they all mean, and they can generally get the idea. And this is why we're big advocates of rereading, right? Because we go back through it again and again, you get more and more out of it. But it's a very similar sort of progression when you're learning another language. Like the more you read, and you may hit a word and you're like, I don't know what that word is. You figure it out, you keep going, or you figure it out via context. My modern languages, I did that a lot. You're reading a news article or something, and you're like, I don't know what that word is, but I'll figure it out through context what they're talking about, and then you just get better and better at it.
And then I will add, if you get to where you're working that, and you're going at a pretty good clip, I would then suggest going to St. Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas' Latin is very simple, and you can what I did. I taught a class on this at one point. I got Peter Kreeft's A Shorter Summa, which is in English, and then you can bring up online your the articles from the Summa Theologica, and all your Latin is there. And so you've got the English and you've got the Latin, and if you've gotten to the point where you can read your Vulgate pretty good, then that's the next place I would go, because then you're doing Christian philosophy. So that's the way I do it. Also, by the way, Vol Search 4, that program that you can get, is free online. You just look it up and download it, and it's.
And what does that do?
And that's the one where it's a translation program. You got the Latin on the left, English on the right.
Of the Vulgate, of
hovering the cursor,
of
and all
the
that.
Latin Bible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
That's what I do.
Okay.
I haven't got back. I'm aspiring to go back to my Greek.
There you go.
At some point too, but not yet.
Well, we all probably have experienced that learning a language is difficult. What encouragement might you give to people when they get stuck? Because we're probably going to get there. I remember I did Greek in college, and I will never forget the day that our professor led us to participles. And he said, this is where your brain breaks. And you've got some momentum behind you, and then you hit something that just seems like, I will never get over this mountain. You do, but you feel like you're never going to get there.
That's right.
It's so discouraging at times. Yeah. It's worth it. But if you could say something to that person who's maybe like smashed up against the wall of participles or whatever it is for them.
Well, I think one of the best things you can do is to get over the kind of thinking that says you should understand it. That you should just immediately know what it is. Now, I don't mean to intimate that you can't understand it or that you shouldn't go on to understand it, but I think you need to get over the hump of thinking, I'm an idiot. Why can't I understand this? Well, because we're all idiots at times, and this has been a difficult thing for everybody to learn.
You're saying getting rid of the assumption that you can perceive something at first grasp.
Something at first grasp. I think that's the biggest. That's the reason I stopped at times. And then it took me realizing, no, maybe I just need to keep going forward with it, keep struggling with it, keep making bad translations. The thing is, this is difficult to do by yourself, because my experience has always been in the classroom.
Yeah.
A lot of what helped me get over this kind of thing was being in a classroom where my professor would call on you and you would have to translate the sentence, translate whatever, and then he would ask you all kinds of questions about the parsing, the forms, what's going on with the grammar. And it took the multiple, nope, that's not right. What is it? You have to stumble and you have to fall quite a few times before you start getting to the point where you start getting the right answers. At which point the professor's like, you got it. That's it. And I have plenty of stories. I was once in an advanced Greek grammar class. So by that point I knew Greek pretty well. And we were translating a difficult early Christian text, and I translated the sentence. I knew he was going to call on me because I was actually studying with him at a different level than some of the other people in the class. And it was one of the hardest verses I had gotten to in my translation of that. So I just knew he was coming for me on that one. And he did. And as soon as I was done, he said, wow, that was very literal. And I knew that I was sunk because I couldn't give a good, it demonstrated that I didn't really know what that author was saying in such a way that I could put it into good idiomatic English.
You're not able to think.
I wasn't able to think like it. And so again, it was that understanding of, I am not going to immediately understand this at first grasp. So that means it is okay to sit down, to pause, maybe even take a break for a bit, come back to it, let it work on you, and just keep going.
That's what I was going to say is back up, review, take a running start again. Yeah. Right. Because what Ian said earlier, right? Like you stew in it. It takes time for it to sink in, because we are used to thinking in a certain way, right? Whatever our mother tongue is. And all of a sudden you're being asked to, or you're deciding by learning Latin to think about the way you think in a different way. So it just takes time. And I've been intimidated about learning a language as an adult. All of my language learning was before I was 25. And I've always been a little been worried the past 15 years about like, if I pick up another one, like, is my mental agility, like, is my brain still plastic enough for it to sink in? It's a big hurdle. But I will say about the not being afraid to make mistakes. When I was learning French and I was in French speaking Canada and I didn't know a lick of French going up there. And so everything was in French, our communal prayers, our classes, everything was. But then when I would try to speak French, what I was doing was I was thinking it in English and trying to translate it. And I had a friend who, he was Mexican, he spoke English, but he was learning French alongside me. And he says, Paul, you've got to go straight to the French.
Think in French.
And I was like, wait. But the French are sticklers. Like if I make a mistake, like I said, but I also don't want to like create a bad pattern in my head. That was my worry. I didn't want to create a bad habit of using something improperly. And you know, his response was, don't worry, those French, they will correct you. Like they will correct you. But that was I really needed that encouragement because I was refusing to get out of my English bubble. Even though I learned Latin as a kid, you know, like I was Spanish too, like here I was learning French, but I'd never there is a linguistic jump from being able to read and comprehend to being able to sort of encode or to think in that language. Right. And I got to a point where I was like dreaming in French. Right. So like I knew I made that. But it's that transition, whether it's in Latin or another language, but it's that transition in Latin and Greek particularly, where like we talk about worlds being opened up to you, say because you got this literature and stuff. No, it's literally like you start thinking differently, and you can parse stuff out differently, not because you're mentally going step by step, but because all of that processing is happening in the background of your head.
It's really training your processing
good
power.
At it. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's a wonderful thing. It is intimidating, but if you do get stuck, it's just back up, let it simmer, go again. And ask other people. Like Martin's recommendation, use the forums. Absolutely. 100% agree. If you have the Henley Grammar next to you, you know, or another Latin grammar book, you know, go read the different ways it's explained.
Yes.
Because that's one of those will click and you go, oh, now I get it. And then you go back to the first reading and you go, oh, now I see what I couldn't see before.
Yeah. And we do have classes on the forums for adults.
We do.
Sue Strickland leads a summer-long class for the forums. You can do first forum, second forum, third. Yeah. So it's accelerated, but she does a fantastic job and they're very popular.
And they're recorded too. So if you get behind, you can go back and watch them later. But that's for people that want the accountability, right? If you're retired, you're like, hey, I'm going to spend 3 hours a day working on this and I'm I think this will be fun. You might not need that. Right. But if you need the accountability, doing one of those through the summer would give you a good shot in the arm.
And I think at many points in trying to do this, you do need that accountability. You know, maybe not all the time, but you know.
And the solidarity.
You needed it first, I think.
You had that accountability because you had to teach it.
Yeah, I had to teach it. The best way to, and I'll say this too, but on that point, that that is absolutely correct. Because if you volunteer, which is well, I didn't volunteer. Cheryl told me I was going to do it. But if you volunteer to teach a Latin course, a beginning Latin course, you will learn it. You know, that is the best way to do it, really. I mean, if you can
keeps the fire underneath you because you got to stay
forcing
ahead of
function.
That's right.
Yeah. You got responsibilities. You got deadlines. You got and you do them.
But with any language acquisition, a little bit every day is much better than having a longer chunk, like 1 day a week kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Do a little bit every day.
That's right. Got to get those vocab flashcards and
and
declensions. Well, this was a wonderful discussion, gentlemen. I hope that it gave, and I'm confident it did, gave our listeners who are curious about learning a language maybe just an extra boost to get started and some steps on how. So, and if you do start maybe with the forum series or something else, write us at our podcast email and tell us how it's going. I'd love to hear. Like, Suzanne, if you start, let us know how it goes. We'll be your cheerleaders. And that inbox is podcast@memoriapress.com. We really would love to hear from everybody. Yeah.
And one little tidbit is that since I started working here, we have had people call us with Latin questions.
Yes.
And so if you get stuck or you're working through the form series, you're like, I don't get this. Pick up the phone, call us. You'll probably get John.
Yes.
But there's several of us that can answer those questions and help you through it.
That's right. Yeah. Excellent point. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.